What's up? Hope you're doing all right. Just let a few people join in, then we'll get this show on the road. It probably won't be a long one, but we shall see how the night goes. I'm not sure if you're a follower, Mr. 2000 BHP, but I did a poll earlier in the week, and we were talking about the new policy for free travel for under 22s in Scotland, and whether that's a good thing or not. Generally speaking, most people thought it was a good idea. This was about 60% thought it was a good idea. 40%, what's up, Kev? Thought it was a bad idea. And then when I asked the question another way, it was like, how many of you would pay for someone else's travel? And the answer was overwhelmingly no. If you had to pay for someone else's travel, that you weren't using the same travel, sort of thing. And 90% said no, 10% said yes. So this is one of those things where, the name of the policy, the name of the idea kind of sells it more than what the actual policy is. I'm just going to get into it. People join in as we go into it. So basically, from I think January 31st, if I'm correct, but beginning of next year, the S&P, I believe, want to give free travel for all the under 22 people, regardless of age bracket. Hello, Lorna. And for me, this is a mad idea because, I'm a 90s kid. I had to take the bus to school every day and was taking it since, I was like 7 years old and had to pay for those bus travels. So today, the idea now that everyone, regardless of income bracket or whatever, needs to pay for, cannot pay for their bus travel is a myth. It's an absolute myth. And to me, this is an example of buying votes to, because you want to be seen as the compassionate party. You want to be seen as, we're for the young people, this, that, and the other. And I was reading some of Transport Scotland's actual, statements on the thing. And they said under the new scheme, approximately 930,000 will join the third of the Scotland's population through the older and disabled persons free scheme. So we already have a third of the population, the Scottish population, getting free bus travel. And another almost 1 million people would be added onto it. And these aren't people that are disabled. These aren't people that are necessarily poor. These are, for all intents and purposes, a large percentage of these people will be fully able-bodied and willing. They could pay if they wanted to, sort of thing. It's not necessarily that these people are on the dole or in the lowest bracket, but yet the taxpayer is being asked to pay for them. And to me, that just seems wild. And I'm always suspicious of any policy from the government that says something is free, because nothing is free. Everything has a cost. And when the government starts issuing free stuff, what actually happens is that it becomes a way to funnel taxpayers' money into a corporation's hands. Because if we look at this scheme, like First Bus, I'm from Aberdeen. First Bus basically has the chokehold on Aberdeen. What will happen is a child or a young person under the age of 20 will go on the bus. The bus driver will give him a ticket for, the under 21s. Cool. That's not, the cost of that ticket doesn't go away. That cost is just going to be, the First Bus is just going to send a bill to the taxpayer that the government will have to pay. And now it's not just the person who uses the bus that has to pay. Now all of us are paying, In certain instances, this is all right, in my opinion, because it pays off future dividends. Like here in Scotland, there's free university education for Scottish people. And I think in a world that people, more and more jobs require degrees and require training, it's worth it in the end. Almost, it's worth it in the end, because in theory, you have a populace of more committed people. I'm just going to read a comment here from Lorna. It says, I agree, it seems like those in the age bracket 25 to 59 are left out and are expected to pay for these quote-unquote free schemes through taxes. And that's the crux of the matter. There's like, I have less of a problem for people, in the retirement age being getting like free things, because for 60 years they've paid their taxes, they've contributed to society and all that. It's kind of like, okay, you've looked after us over the time being, and we can look after you in your latter years. I'm not so against that, but and someone who's under 22, you're not even in your prime. Like, it's one of those things where if you can't afford a car, and you take the bus, and if you can't afford a bus, then walk. It won't kill you. Like that's even less emissions, which even brings us to the second point I want to bring up, because it's also being kind of brought in line to this idea from that this free transport scheme is it's also about reducing emissions and stuff. Here's a quote from the Minister of Transport, Graham Day. It says, it's crucial to embed more sustainable travel behavior from a young age if we are to achieve our goal of reducing the number of kilometers traveled by car by 20% by 2030 and reaching zero emissions by 2045, end quote. One thing I would say is, who asked you personally if you wanted to use your car less? It's one of these things where, did your place of work or did your supermarket get 20% closer in the last year? Because some of these promises, like, one thing about politicians is that they promise things that they've got no ability to achieve. And that's what snookers them, because they promise things, it's impossible to make these sorts of concessions. Things like waiting times, like who decides who is sick and at what time they are sick. There's nothing that you can do to change that. There are certain policies that encourage you to take better care of yourself, and certain policies that encourage you not to. But that doesn't necessarily mean that, we can make sure that waiting lines are 15 minutes less. I mean, for someone that's worked in retail a lot of my life, you can put more people on the tills, but once the number of tills are full, that queue is just gonna have to wait it out. There's nothing else you can really do beyond that. And when it comes to this idea that this is about lowering emissions, I think that's a lie, because if you're 22 or under 22 now and you're getting this free travel and you're not having to that expense of having to pay for the bus, one of the things that can maybe prevent people from even learning how to drive sometimes is the fact that, oh, well, I'm spending money on the bus, and you know, I don't want to also, put money towards learning how to drive or buying a car or whatever. But if you don't have to pay for transport at all, if you start work at 18, by the time you're 22, you might have saved up for a car because you're not spending any money on transport. You might have saved up and got your license and lessons and all that sort of stuff. I don't necessarily think this has much to do with lowering emissions. I think this is just about securing the under 22 vote in Scotland, because any person, any party that threatens to take this away will be seen as, you're the person that took away the free travel from under 20-year-olds and under 22-year-olds, And nobody likes getting free stuff taken away from them, to be honest, He goes on to say that we know that young people have been disproportionately impacted as a result of COVID-19, of the COVID-19 pandemic. So it's never been more important that we support them to achieve their fullest potential. Reducing barriers created by transport costs is one really positive action we can take. Hi, Natalie. How are you? And the thing is, even that, I'm not entirely sure if that is a legitimate statement, because who's to say who hasn't or who has suffered more from COVID? These are the same people that we started vaccinating the elderly first because they were the most vulnerable, and we've moved down the age because, according to the science, the young people were the most resilient people with regards to COVID-19. And now they're saying, oh, they've been disproportionately impacted as a result. Who hasn't been disproportionately impacted, There's lots of people. There's the elderly. There's people who had to care for the elderly. There's the disabled and the people who had to care for the disabled. There's mothers, there's fathers, there's brothers, there's sons. I don't necessarily buy into this. Young people were disproportionately impacted in regards to everyone else. I think it has affected a lot of people in every social, economic, cultural strata. And you're just picking one. And you're picking one. Why? Because you want to secure their vote. You want to be seen as this, oh, we're the people that look after people. There's these token gestures, but you're using taxpayers' money for these token gestures. I don't like the idea of governments using the tax collected from everyone to pinpoint too many interest groups, so that they can say, oh, we're the party for the women, or we're the party for the ethnic minorities, and this, that, and the other. Because, a situation like this, it becomes like another scheme the SNP did, was like the free, there was a baby pack for new mothers. Every mother in Scotland got this baby pack. I think it had a blanket, maybe some powdered milk, and a box that could turn into a cot almost. And I remember speaking to a new mother. Hello, Eduardo. I remember speaking to a young Scottish mother who had just had a child, and we were talking about it. And I said, she said that this was one of SNP's good policies. And I thought, well, did you use, when you just, seeing as you just had your child, did you use the baby pack? She said, no, I actually had, I could afford, nicer stuff, basically. And I was like, well, it's a waste then. Because rather than even target the lowest income people, or people on the dole, or people who really can afford a cot and some of these things, and provide for them, and even maybe provide more for a smaller number of people, They said, no, we'll give every mother, whether they require them or not, this baby pack. And rightly so, a lot of mothers were like, well, I can actually afford milk. I can actually afford a nicer blanket. I can actually afford a nicer cot. Like I've prepared nicely for this child, and I want to put him in the nice things that I can afford, or my parents are helping me out to provide some better quality things that will improve the quality of my child's life. And I'm totally on board with that. But we all paid for it, and we all paid for the wastage. And on the flip side, someone was paid a contract for all those cots made, in the same way that these new 930,000 people that will be getting free travel, first bus, all the same bus companies that, to be honest, many of us are not happy with in the first place, have just secured the bag from the government, because for every young person that goes on that maybe wouldn't have gone on the bus if they had to pay for it themselves, is now going to go on and send the bill repeatedly to the taxpayer. And it's not like we have finished or even began to pay for this COVID business, sort of thing. Like, taxes are going up. Taxes are going up for everyone. And this idea that, we should be really examining what what government supports, or what government apparatuses that will, or apparati, maybe, I don't know, want to be pulled back, which things are going to be cut, because every time I think about what the bill is going to be for this last year and a half, or getting to 2 years of COVID, and vaccines and non-vaccines, and the lack of productivity, and blah 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 blah, it makes me sick thinking about it, sort of thing. Like, literally, I think more than likely for the rest of my life, we will be paying for this. We'll be paying for it. So when you're trying to sneak in all these funny policies, I think it's not a good look, and it's not ideal. And I think this is what kind of breeds corruption. This idea that people sneak these policies that funnel taxpayers' monies into business owners' hands is something that we want to avoid in a decent society, because we've been complaining about how certain billionaires and certain companies have made trillions off of COVID. But I mean, this is just another example of that, because even during COVID, Amazon wasn't shutting their warehouses, but certain warehouses had to be shut. So, even if they could have made the same arrangements as the Amazon warehouse, even if they could have made the same concessions that allowed them to perform, even like restaurants and kitchens, if they were willing to cover themselves completely and maybe have people deliver the food, like, man, they could have still remained open. But many were just forced to shut by government mandate, and thus forcing the consumer down certain avenues, because, oh well, I would go out for a takeout, but all the takeouts are closed, so I've got more money that I can spend on ASOS or whatever. We were funneled down certain ways, kind of unfairly, and that's something that I don't necessarily agree with. And this is the same sort of principle. Taxpayers' money is being funneled into the avenues of basically bus companies, and bus companies that are not necessarily bringing the value to their consumers the way every other business has to. And I'm going to wrap up right there. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. I'm not sure if there'll be another one next week. I'm trying to find a guest for next week, actually. So if you want to join and have a discussion, please drop me a DM. But otherwise, have a good one, folks.